This video is following on from my previous YouTubes about having Cotard's delusion, Cotard syndrome, as this proved to be my most viewed video since I posted it a couple of years ago. And from that video I've had quite a few people reaching out to me, people going through similar problems and issues and struggles, but also people who are sort of, I guess, studying it and doing documentaries. And most of the time they never really lead to anything because, to be honest, I'm just not really interested in following through with anything like that anymore. It's so far behind me, and I've been going through enough other stuff in my own life currently. So I don't really make content or anything at all at the moment. However, someone did make their best efforts to contact me and, has asked me a few questions, and just because they clearly could do with the answers, I've made this video just to give an update, essentially. Okay, so regarding the Cotard syndrome, the first question I've been asked is, how did it start? Was it gradual, or did it appear out of nowhere? Now, it's one of those things that, where do you choose at the beginning? Because at the end of the day, I could just sort of say the events where it really made itself obvious, or I could kind of give my whole personal background, personal history as a step-by-step explanation as to how that's the path that I ended up on. So, for example, it depends how far back you want to go. If I just said, I essentially, my family life fell apart, there was physical abuse, there was violence, I fell into mental health issues that then doctors gave the label of depression, and so then I believed I was depressed because that's what I was told. I was then medicated for these things. Obviously doctors wanted to put me in a mental hospital a few times, and so in that, it's very much just kind of simplified. Okay, so I had some bad things happen in my life, and that led to that sort of outcome. But then it's the fact that, I wasn't depressed. I was extremely angry with no idea of how to get that anger out, right? So I was destroying myself internally. I was shutting down internally, but from the outside professional medication standard, I was depressed, right? And then through taking the medications prescribed to me, as well as, by that point, no longer caring about my life, I didn't care what I was doing, and I started doing all kinds of other drugs. So maybe it was the cocktail of drugs that led to this delusion that I found myself in. But even after having taken the medications and quit taking the medications and quit using the all forms of substances, I still had it, but maybe that's because I was in the delusion by that point, and it was again a labyrinth that I could not escape. I'd spent years trying to navigate it, and it only just further proved that there was a labyrinth that I was trapped within. But then I can take it further and say that, in terms of family history, my mother had a background of mental health issues when she was younger, which was understandable given the fact that her father committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. And apparently his mother was mentally unwell. So you've got four generations of my family lineage with mental health issues. And so it was passed on, it was compounding. There's a modality, an idea, a concept, an emotional inheritance that needed to be addressed and figured out and understood. And it was just that in my lifetime, that is how it expressed itself. But obviously, fortunately, having been the one to see it, feel it, and face it, and clear myself of that inherited emotional traumas, I know that when I have children, that will not be passed on to them, because that's no longer an energy or a concept or a belief or a pattern that is in my life or my psyche. And again, so this is one of those things that I could go off on a huge tangent here. But to answer the question, it started from, in my lifetime, from the family falling apart, my life falling apart, and basically not knowing who I was or what reality was, or where the foundation was beneath my feet. And it was a very gradual process. Obviously I can't say when it suddenly started or when it suddenly stopped. Like boiling water, the analogy of a frog in a pot of water. The frog doesn't know that the water's boiling until it's too late. And for me, I just kept going on the path that I was on, and sooner or later found myself with the Cotard syndrome, the Cotard's delusion. Now, the second question here is, why did it happen, and did I get any answers? So I've kind of explained why it happened. Again, it was definitely the background of my psyche and the substances in my body. Anybody can tell you there's certain drugs that they give you when you have mental health issues that just it's like you're here, but your reality is here. There's this huge space between them, and it's not a nice space. It's not like a pleasant area to observe from. It is like a disconnection, like life is here and you're here, and there's just this separation. I remember when I finally decided to come off my medications, there was a point where I was laughing. Something had made me laugh, but I didn't feel like I was laughing. It was like my laughing was somewhere over there whilst I was over here, and it wasn't actually me laughing. And that's when I was like, right, there's something, I think that's when I clocked that something was wrong, even though everything was obviously completely wrong. But that was when it kind of a sobering moment, perhaps. That was kind of a more powerful version of myself was able to step into that moment and recognize things needed to change. Did I get any answers? I ended up, doing meditation, doing yoga, going down the path of shamanism as a result of this. So, I ended up studying myself, sitting for hours of meditation. I studied myself through movement. I studied myself to the point that I understood what was going on with me, what was happening, and what was possible. And that's what led me to the life that I've had since suffering with Cotard syndrome. Helping other people and teaching meditation and all such things. So I guess in that regard you could say I managed to get some answers. I found understanding. I think that's better than an answer, saying that I had an answer. I found understanding, and that understanding led to me correcting myself, healing myself, and growing into the version that I am now. So the third question. Things such as objects, people, and society looked same as it is now, or it looked different, like it was more of a perception thing. They want to understand how my world was. I mean, I don't really know how I perceived anything beyond myself, because so it's in terms of like I think I'm going to get this right. So in terms of like a philosophical standpoint, it's a Cotard syndrome is very solipsistic in terms of that, you think you're the only thing that exists. So beyond myself, I didn't think anything was real. I didn't think I was real. Obviously, I thought I was already dying and that I was in a dream. So the only sort of place that my mind was, where my thoughts were with my experience and just questioning everything. So I believed that everybody that I interacted with was my own subconscious. They weren't real people. They weren't my family or my cousins or my friends. They were generated by my brain in the dream world to convince me that I'm alive, to make it seem like this was real, So I don't know if everything looked the same. I would definitely say now that, there is a vibrancy in my life now that I am free of that illusion, now that I'm free of the syndrome. I find great beauty in everything around me, which I can't say for certain because I don't really remember, but it's not something that I would have considered back then at all. I would not have considered the beauty of things, because there was no mental free space for such a thing. There was no space to admire or enjoy. It was just this kind of, not even fear, just a confusion and disconnection. So I was so disconnected from myself, it was impossible to give any consideration to anything beyond my own experience, my own existence. So next question here. Did it come to you to hurt you or somebody else, as all of them are already dead? Did it come to you to hurt you or somebody else as they're already dead? So sorry, I don't really know what this question means. Now, again, to reiterate, I believed, so obviously this was me as I am now, but internally I believed that my real body was dying in a car crash. I believed that I had been driving, I'd crashed my car, and that my body was dying, and that my body was experiencing the last 7 minutes of brain activity that apparently happens when you die. And in that 7 minutes of brain activity, I was living out the rest of my life like a dream. And obviously, so, in those 7 minutes, it's possible that your brain can function at such a state, a higher function or speed or whatever, that, I was living years within minutes, essentially. That was what I believed. So I believed that I was dying, and that nothing else was real. So yeah, the way that I came out of my Cotard syndrome was honestly purely really by myself. Yes, it's very hard to answer that, because ultimately, there's a whole world around you at all times, at all points. So you're never alone, you're never doing anything in complete isolation. Did I go off on my own path, and did I, by myself, choose to sit down and meditate? Basically, what happened was I overdosed on LSD. I had a very intense experience for a few days on this heavy dose of LSD that was given to me. And many things happened during this experience, but the main two things that it showed me, the first one was, if this is a dream, you are the dreamer. So therefore make this dream the best it can be, because at the end of the day, if you are dying and this is the last experience of your life, it's all you have. So don't waste it by throwing your life away. Make this a dream worth dreaming. So that was, the sort of the main message of this experience. But the other thing was essentially that I had been, by this powerful LSD experience, I'd been so far removed from my, this like my mind was trapped in here. Whatever I was trapped in this space that was the delusion. This was the labyrinth of my Cotard syndrome that I could not escape. And this LSD experience was so powerful that it took me well outside of that labyrinth, and I could see it from far away. And I realized, there's another way of being, there's another state of being. Whether it's a dream or not doesn't matter. The way that I can feel, the way that I can experience can be different. The way that I'm feeling and experiencing right now is just one way. And I can choose and act to walk a path that leads me in a direction of experiencing life differently. And so, it didn't happen immediately. It took some time. I didn't understand the experience straight away, and I didn't know things like meditation or yoga or any of this stuff. I didn't know any of it. But I was looking for something, and I found it in the forms of books, I guess, fortune. The right things came into my path, and because I was looking, I was paying attention, and I was no longer judging because I was looking to learn. And so, I stumbled into meditation, and that really was the first step that led me out of the mental health issues, all of them. And I mean, it wasn't easy. There was a point I think there was a day I had a real mental health breakdown, a real, psychotic episode. And in fact, that led to a relationship ending. Someone I had found, I'd started taking care of myself, started healing, started meditating, got myself into a relationship, which lasted maybe a year and a half. Then, again, because of my mental health issues that were still going in the background, that destroyed the relationship. And when it ended, I made the decision that I will sit down and meditate every single day until I am better. And, I said to myself, I don't care if it takes the rest of my life. At least then I won't be hurting anyone, and I won't be hurting myself. So every day I made it wasn't a choice. I just had to. Part of every day I was working on myself, meditating, doing whatever I needed to do to at least not be upsetting or hurting anyone else. And so that level of commitment, without focusing on the outcome, quickly led to me healing. I'd say I did that for about 2 years. It was about a 2-year period where I was in no relationship. I wasn't with anybody. I was every day committed to improving my life. And I'd changed my whole life because, I realized that the way that I was wrong. The way that I was living was wrong. And I had to do everything differently. I had to be somebody else. I had to take a step back from all of it to go inside of myself and heal. And so very fortunately, I guess maybe it was about 2 years. Maybe it was about 2 years in total. And by the end of it, I wasn't perfect. I still had a long way to go, but I was certainly on top of things. And then that led to me exploring shamanism. Whilst reading about meditation, I'd read about DMT, the spirit molecule. I'd read, because LSD had led me to this revelation, it made me recognize that, there is something more. It's not just a drug. It's not just something to take to get high. Like it taught me something. It showed me something. And it led me on a path that was right for me. So, I continued with it. So that led me to working with the shamans, working with ayahuasca. And after my first ayahuasca retreat, when I spoke to my mum immediately afterwards, by the time I finished telling her everything that had happened, she was crying with joy, saying that she had her little boy back. And I was back. I was fun, I was free, I was flowing, I was, again, still had more work to do, but, I was very much back to who I've always been before I was lost. And so, to be honest, really, the next question is any movie or documentary that bears a close resemblance to what I've been through. To be honest, Inception. Weirdly so. Inception, the sort of framework for being in a dream really was the way that I perceived reality. In Inception, they don't know, the risk in Inception is that they don't know they're dreaming. And, they've got to make sure that they're waking up, and that was where I was. I didn't know if I was, I didn't think I was alive. I thought I was in a dream. And so some people have asked me if, so over the years I've spoken with people, I've helped a few people with similar experiences and backgrounds and all this kind of stuff. I will not be passing on, and just because a few people have asked, I will not be passing on anybody's information. This is not, if people want to share their experience, that's down to them. I'm not going to be involved in connecting people or, getting anybody's personal details or information. No, I won't be doing that. So just in future, if anybody, you're doing I don't care if you're doing a documentary or a movie or whatever it is, I'm sorry, but, you found me, I won't be leading you anywhere else. Thank you very much, everyone. I know it's a bit of a long one, but thank you for tuning in. And as always, if there's any questions, leave a comment below.